This is Keys to the Shop, episode 160, Smart Ways to Approach Money with Jill Schlesinger. Hey everybody, and welcome to another episode of Keys to the Shop, where we give you insights, inspiration, and the tools you need to grow as a coffee service professional. My name is Chris DeFirio. I'm your host for the show, and today we are honored to have Jill Schlesinger on the program to talk to us about managing our money. Specifically, this conversation relates to business owners and entrepreneurs. This is something I think that will really benefit everyone, because at one point we're all going to be in this position, hopefully. And Jill lays out some great wisdom to help us use the money that we make wisely, so it becomes a great tool to accomplish the goals that we have. So I'm really excited for this. Now, today's episode is brought to you by Prima Coffee. Prima is a leading specialty coffee equipment supplier. They curate the best equipment from all over the world to fit perfectly with the needs of both their enthusiast and professional customers. They want to help you make great coffee, whether that's at home or in the shop. So if you're just wanting to build out an amazing coffee bar in your home, they've got you covered. If you want to outfit your shop with the best equipment, if you're looking to expand and you need to equip the second store with the best gear, this is the place to go, prima-coffee.com. Now, once you get to the website, I guarantee you're going to be impressed. They have an amazing selection, and they have great resources that they provide to you free of charge to help you become expert in using this equipment. I just can't recommend them enough. If you're looking for the best equipment and expert assistance to go along with it, then I recommend you go to prima-coffee.com. Reach out to them via email or phone. Let them know that Keys to the Shop sent you. And thank you so much, Prima, for your support of Keys to the Shop. Today's episode is also brought to you by the wonderful Pacific Barista Series. This is the line of plant-based performance beverages that are designed specifically for professional baristas and the standards for excellence that they demand. Whether you choose to use their almond, soy, coconut, rice, or oat milk, its ability to take the heat from steaming, produce an unmatched silky texture, and keep the flavor balance focused on coffee makes it a perfect choice for your cafe's menu. This is a company that is so deeply dedicated to your success as a coffee professional. That's why these products were designed in tandem with the feedback of professionals across the globe, and it shows in the final product. I recommend you get this in your shop and try it out. Go to pacificfoods.com. Learn more about the Barista Series line of plant-based performance beverages, and how they can help elevate the non-dairy offerings you have in your shop. Thank you so much, Pacific, for your support of Keys to the Shop. All right, so today we're going to be talking about upgrading your approach to money. Of course, this is a subject that is always on your mind, especially if you have a lot of it invested into something like a business. And a lot of our discussion today with Jill Schlesinger is centered around the management of money and the approach to money from the point of view of a business owner or an entrepreneur. These are things I think that so many of us here in the Keys to the Shop community can relate to. And I'm excited to have somebody with as much wisdom and experience dealing with personal and professional finances as Jill Schlesinger to help guide us on the right path. So Jill Schlesinger is an Emmy-nominated and Gracie Award-winning business analyst for CBS News. She spent 14 years as a co-owner and chief investment officer for an independent investment advisory firm. She began her career as a self-employed options trader on the Commodities Exchange of New York following her graduation from Brown University. Jill is the host of the Jill on the Money podcast of the nationally syndicated radio show Jill on the Money, which won the 2018 Gracie Award for Best National Talk Show. Jill appears on CBS radio stations all over the country and covers the topics of economy, markets, investing, and anything else with a dollar sign. She translates complicated business and economic news into understandable, relatable topics for everyday viewers and listeners. She is a weekly guest on NPR's Here and Now and writes the national syndicated column Jill on the Money for Tribune Media Service. With all of this experience and wisdom under her belt, Jill has authored the new book, The Dumb Things Smart People Do with Their Money. In the book, Jill reveals 13 costly mistakes that we're probably making right now with our money without even knowing it. She draws on heartfelt personal stories and argues that it's not the lack of intelligence that causes people to make these mistakes. It's just emotional blind spots. And we really dig into this in our conversation. And like I said, specifically, we kind of focus on the business side of things. Jill talks about some of the mistakes from the book, and we talk in depth about the approach to money that's most helpful for folks in business and also for your personal life and your personal finances. So again, this is such an honor. I know you're going to get a lot of great insight from this conversation. Jill has so much wisdom. Here now is my conversation with Jill Schlesinger. Well, hello, Jill. Welcome to the show. It's quite an honor to have you on.
Oh, thanks for having me. So delighted to be with you.
This is quite a big topic that you tackle in your career in this new book, and I'm sure that there could be several follow-up books to this. And I just wanted to start out by saying first, thank you for taking on a subject that we all need to know more about, personal finance and handling money well. But what was the catalyst for this book in the first place? You've had a long career in finance and advising people accordingly. What was the thing that inspired you to say, I need to write this book?
Well, it's been interesting because I started my career as a Wall Street trader. I then went into financial advisory work, and now I call it generalized talking head into the media. And what I found is that, whether it was my clients, whether it was my friends or business colleagues, or whether it was the callers to my radio show and my podcast, I just kept running into some problems that people continued to sort of make these mistakes. And I thought to myself, why is it? Why are these are smart people. I remember literally saying one day, like, this is a smart person. How is this possible? And the reason it's possible is that I felt like we were not having an open and honest conversation, that so much of money is emotional. And more often than not, that is the critical factor that makes you sort of derails your game plan or pushes you to make a wrong decision. So yes, of course, there is some education here, but given the fact that there's so much information that's widely available, why are people making these mistakes? My guess is that many times it's because of your emotions.
Yeah, so that particular point is something that, the emotions are so connected to your mindset. They're intrinsically linked. You can't really tell them apart sometimes, and that's one of the things that drives us to make decisions about everything in our life is our mindset towards it. And so I wonder, what is the mindset mistake that people are making, or as you put it, the emotional mistake that people are making when it comes to how they approach money?
I think that the idea around making money decisions requires people to kind of do a little bit of inventory about how they were raised about money. And I think that sometimes we don't realize, like most things in life, it is your parents' fault. No, I'm just kidding. But I mean that it is, you are raised in a certain way, and you have a relationship with money that's usually formed at a pretty young age. I mean, when I talk to a lot of experts and psychologists and even those in behavioral economics and finance, they're telling me that often the messaging you receive from age 10 to 18 can create a mindset later in life that is problematic. And so let me give you an example of that. If you grew up in a place of scarcity, there was no money in your house, and money became the object of every conversation, and it was anxiety, and it was used as maybe something that was held over your head. As you become an adult, that mindset is there. You cannot erase it, but you do have to acknowledge it. And it may be worthwhile understanding, what is my relationship with money? Does it scare me? Does it excite me? Do I give it more power than I should? How is it that I am allowing money to creep into my life? Your mindset hopefully gets to a more dispassionate place a place where you can say, okay, now I'm making a financial decision. I understand that I would probably lean towards maybe fear, or maybe you lean towards greed. Those are kind of the two basic emotions. But understanding which way you lean and moderating that leaning is a very helpful thing when you are starting to make a series of financial decisions. And those decisions can be anything from, how much money am I going to commit to a new business to how much money am I going to commit to my retirement planning? All of these things really do factor in. And so I would just hope that, if you read my book, there are a series of stories that I tell about very smart people who I think if they had done some of that work prior would have made better decisions.
So what do you do with that revelation that you need to audit your approach to money to sort of discover your, like a personality test? What's your Enneagram number for money or whatever? What is it that you would suggest people do to take the first step in assessing whether or not they're in a healthy place or not?
I think that people are well aware that they are screwed up about money, because I will tell you that after being on book tour now for almost 6 months, there are so many people who will come up to me and say, oh my God, this is me. Like, I run my professional life so well, or I am a great manager, or even I run my own business so well, but my personal financial life is rife with all of these crazy mistakes. And so I think that you kind of know, if you say to yourself, is money an issue that I really hate talking about? I encounter many people who say, like, I'm not interested in this. And you know what? I think people put their heads in the sand when they are uncomfortable and they say, I don't want to deal with this. I don't want to step on the scale. I don't want to go to the gym the first time in many months. I don't want to actually even have a conversation about what my financial goals are because I'm so uptight about it. So if that's the camp you fall in. And conversely, if all you like to do is run spreadsheets and look at the analysis, but that you actually are fearful of making a decision, that too. And many of these people could be well served by seeking a third party to help them out. It's simply a case where if you acknowledge that you're not moving forward and past your sort of your primary families or your family of origins stories that you are telling yourself, that you probably need help. I'll tell you a funny story. It just happened to me this past weekend. So I was with some friends. They were visiting from out of town, and one of them grew up in a very, very poor family. The other one grew up in sort of a solidly lower middle class, not wealthy, but like they did fine. Everyone went to college and came out okay. But the woman, who is 66 years old and an attorney, is still so gripped by fear that even when I said to her, you'll have enough money to retire. You're 66 years old. Why are you working 80 hours a week still? And she goes, well, I just don't feel like we have enough. And I said, but I just showed you that you do. And she goes, well, I guess I don't believe it. And I said, well, then I guess that you are really crazy, because that's insane. You're just now making yourself nuts. And it's funny that if you're at that place where you don't believe the numbers, or you say, oh no, the numbers are lying. I'm doing fine. I don't need to save more money. If those are the kinds of conversations you're having, you better get yourself into a qualified financial professional's office and start writing that ship, because that will bring you down.
Absolutely. And that's, of course, where you and your book come in as as you said, dispassionate third party that is not chained by those emotional, the histories that dictate your behavior. And it sounds like even when somebody is running spreadsheets and is very meticulous about the money, but is gripped by fear, or somebody is just not wanting to look at the money at all, and they are equally gripped by fear. It's one of the first points you make in the book about one of the mistakes people make is that they make money more important than it is. And it seems to be something that might be at the base of what we're just talking about. I wonder if you can just explain that a little bit, because so many of us feel money is important and we feel justified in that, but maybe we're overstepping into a little bit too much importance. How do we approach this?
I think that's a really important question that the way you lay it out, which is, how do you know when you've sort of gone off the rails, right? And I think that what I try to do is outline some things that might be clues to you. So, for example, are you losing sleep because of financial decisions? Are you and I'm not saying one bad day in the market or something else, but is this a source of real anxiety for you? Is this causing conflict in your relationships? Are you getting into fights with your spouse or your boyfriend or your girlfriend constantly about money? Are you having fights with your kids about money? Are you having fights with your parents about money? And one of those things, if you say yes to one of those things, you have to then say to yourself, what am I bringing to the table? Am I making these money conversations more important than they need to be? Am I basically saying to my spouse, like, you are just spending too much money, when in fact, you know what? Maybe your spouse is spending a little bit, but it's fine. It's no big deal. Or are you so gripped by fear or greed that you yourself are derailed from making a decision at all? Because some people don't make decisions because they just are scared of making a wrong one. And what I'm trying to really lay out in the book is the idea that money is your means to an end. You've got overall goals and objectives. I was in the business of providing financial advice for 14 years. Very rarely when a client would come in or a prospect would come in, did somebody, and I said, well, tell me what brings you here. And it would start maybe with the markets. But if I started to really deep dive and say, tell me what some of your goals are, very few people said, I want to be rich. What people would say is, you know what? I just want to make sure I can help my kids out with school. I want to make sure that we can retire at an age where we're still healthy enough to enjoy our money. I want to make sure that my parents are taken care of. All of these things are goals, and money may be the means by which you can accomplish some of those goals. My role as the financial professional was to kind of parse through these goals and objectives and say, okay, maybe you can't do all of these things. Let's start to prioritize. And just peeling back the onion is a really good way to stop allowing this big thing called money become the all-important goal. That's not the goal. The goal is I'm trying to get to a place. Money is the means by which I can accomplish that objective.
So people are sort of addicted to the journey, to the means to an end, and can't recognize the end when it comes, and maybe just blow past the goal and never recognize that they've reached it.
Right. Have you ever been around somebody who essentially moves the goalposts on a goal? It's kind of fascinating to watch. You'll say to somebody, well, you need to accumulate $1 million by the time you're 66. You have a pension, you've got your Social Security. If you have $1 million, all you need to do is, if you have that $1 million, you'll be fine. And then the person attains that goal and then says, but I want 2 million. Yeah, okay, you may want that, but you don't need that. Why do you want that? Well, because if 1 is enough, then 2 is twice as good, right? Maybe, but maybe that the idea of going from 1 to 2 is an unrealistic goal. You're going to fall short. You're going to feel bad about yourself when you don't need to feel bad about yourself. You're really in good shape. So what are we trying to do here? And, I can talk about this list. I talk about myself in this book because I've made some blunders myself, but I can tell you my greatest analogy is that I am a lifetime member of Weight Watchers. So when I was in college, I played sports. I got injured. And when I got injured, I stopped playing and I continued to eat as if I were working out 4 hours a day. And you know what happens when you do that? You gain weight. Amazing, right? So I joined Weight Watchers and I put out a goal weight and I hit that goal weight and I wanted to keep going. Why did I want to keep going? I don't know. Maybe because I could. Maybe because, if 145 was the goal weight, then 135 is 10 pounds better. And what I found was that when I kept going, I couldn't have a life and sustain that weight that I had reached. And so I realized actually my original goal was the right goal weight. And sometimes that happens with us financially. You think that more is better, but you can't sustain a life where all you're doing is striving. And once you reach the goal, you can't even enjoy it. That's just crazy making.
It sounds like there's a lot of discomfort that comes with stopping all the momentum you've gained if you're so successful in making your bills go away or your mortgage go away, and now you're just wanting to continue that momentum. It's a big hump to get over, to say, well, now there's a new reality that you need to get used to. And for a lot of people, what you're describing is just in a microcosm what drives so many of my decisions every day. If I get better at something, or if I grab a hold of a habit that's helpful for me, I want to keep going, but I forget about the goal in the first place, and I don't know how to enjoy it.
Right. I mean, it's funny. You think about, for many of the people who listen to you or talk to you, they are saying, all I want is to have my own business. All I want is control over my life, which, by the way, I am a huge fan of. I love the control factor. And then they get into a business, they're running a company or a small shop, and they say they're doing great. And then what's the next thing that somebody will say to you probably is, okay, so now I want to have, if one store is great, then 5 stores would be better, right? 5 times as good. And maybe that person finds out that operating one location was like peak happiness. That's where I loved it. That's where I had the most fun. That's where I could control things. But once it became 5, I stopped doing the things I love to do. I had 5 times as many headaches. I had so many more problems. And so I think that it's really tough, especially for small business people and entrepreneurs, not to want to keep going. Sometimes what you've accomplished is exactly where you want to be. And it takes a very secure person to say, I don't want to go any further. I'm really happy where I am.
That's an excellent point. And one of the things that I really wanted to make sure that we had talked about today is how small business owners, and I would include entrepreneurs in that, because of course we're in the throes of the gig economy. I am one of those people. I've got a podcast and a consulting business, and other folks that listen to this are currently maybe mid-level managers, but they also are a freelance person, or they own shops, or maybe multiple stores. But in any case, they consider themselves business people who are trying to make ends meet and find success, to maybe reach that first milestone. So, I mean, let's talk about small business owners and entrepreneurs, and what kind of mistakes do they make with their money that sort of submarines what we were just talking about, their happiness or their success in that business?
Well, I'm sure that when we think about small business owners, we always hear these fun stories, and it's like success and failure porn, I call it, where it's like one extreme or the other is very intriguing to us, right? And so it's like, oh my God, Spike Lee made a movie and he maxed out his credit cards to make a movie. And then he became an Oscar-winning, phenomenally successful, great filmmaker, blah, blah, blah. This does not mean, the lesson of that story is not you should max out your credit cards to start your business, right? Your lesson of that story is that dude is incredibly talented and got lucky, because it could have been that he basically had a film flop, declared bankruptcy, and never could work again. So I think that what we have to realize is that you need to make decisions that are going to help you start your business, but not put your entire financial future at risk. You're going to take a big risk by starting a business. So what are you going to do to prepare for that? You may need a larger than anticipated emergency reserve fund. If the average working Joe or Josephine needs to have 6 months of expenses that's safe and secure, you're starting a business, maybe you want a year of your expenses in the bank. I've interviewed a lot of entrepreneurs on my podcast, and they'll often say one of the best things and best pieces of advice they got was to make sure that they pretended to themselves they would never make a dime for a year, and then save enough money in advance of that to make sure they could pay their bills. I think the other part is your personal and professional are going to merge. It's just kind of the way it is. How are you going to try to maintain some balance between the two? And that may mean that for the first year that you're in business, you need to have a conversation with your friends, with your family, and say, hey, you know what? Starting this business, it's going to be crazy. I'm just not going to be available. And you have to know that's going to happen. And I think the last thing is obviously that you need to have a plan with realistic goals and objectives. Every single one of us, anyone who's an entrepreneur, is a naturally optimistic person. I remember putting together projections for my small business, and the times when I was overly optimistic, I was often shown exactly how overly by the results. And you have to be quick to make a change. You don't let a bad decision play out over time. I actually learned that more as a trader than anything else. You can make a bad trade. You just have to recognize it's a bad trade and change very quickly. You got to change course. So if you said, hey, you know what? I want to expand. I've got this great business and I've got this plan to raise money and I'm going to open 5 new locations. If it's just not working, you're going to have to take a hard look at what can be cut, because you don't want to be that person who's like, no, I know it will work. I know it will work. And at the end of the day, you're not left with 5, 4, 3, 2, or 1 stores. You're left with 0.
Yikes. Well, that is unfortunately the reality that a lot of people face. And as you're speaking about this, I'm thinking 2 things. First is a lot of people will want to fluff the numbers in their projections so that they can get that loan or make it look better on paper, because maybe they're thinking this doesn't look very successful on paper, but it might be the actual reality. So they say, well, actually, this is how much money I'm going to spend on labor and cost of goods, and it's way idealistic. And the second thing is that we sort of have a sunk cost syndrome going with how much work it took to actually put the business plan together. I wonder, what can we do to both motivate ourselves to just stay the course? Because you need a lot of motivation and inspiration, but sometimes that causes us to have stars in our eyes where we need to have actual data.
I think, that's a great point. I think that where a lot of people are really finding great advice is in a community of peers. Now, way back when, 100 million years ago, when I was running a small business, I don't think we did this very well. And I think that was to our detriment. I think that we saw the people that were in our business as competition, and we didn't want to share our very important, which I'm saying dripping with sarcasm, trade secrets. Nothing's that important, by the way. I mean, I didn't have new software code or anything. I was, it's financial advice. It's pretty much everyone knows what the deal is. That I could have used a peer group of folks who were like us, who were doing what we were doing, and that I didn't tap that resource. And that's, I think, a really important piece of the puzzle. And it's funny. I remember I had spoken to a group way back when called Young Professionals. I think it's YP, and I don't know if they're even still in existence. But what they really tried to do is find people who had small businesses of all different types and put them together and try to build a resource group. Now you can do this so easily. You can listen to your podcast and you have people who are like-minded. And I think what's also kind of neat is to find some mentors. And some of those mentors can be in your business specifically. Some of them don't have to be. I remember when my dad was a trader on Wall Street, and, he had a very narrow lane of what his professional career was. He was an options trader on the floor of the American Stock Exchange. But he'd been around a lot of different businesses in his life. And when he retired, he began mentoring a couple of younger people who were starting businesses. And he was a little bit of an angel investor, but not a lot. He wasn't a big money guy. But he found that it was interesting that his viewpoint about a business was very different than someone who was sunk into it. It is truly the case that a diversity of opinion and experience will make your business better. But if you're only looking inward it is very lonely, and chances are you're getting only that one or two voice refrain in your head. So I think opening yourself up and seeking counsel of others around you, both in your industry, outside of your industry, none of this is really rocket science. I was just interviewing a woman who is a coder. She goes, listen, coding is not that hard. I just want everyone to know it's not that hard to do. Like, I can teach high school kids how to code in like five easy steps. She said, so what we really need to do is have common sense. And sometimes we don't use our common sense when we're running a business. We fall in love with our ideas. And then someone says, well, why are you doing it that way? And you're saying, I don't know, because we were.
Yeah, we can get defensive too. When it comes to somebody coming from the outside, and we really need to make them understand the context and all of our sorrows and pains before they have the right to speak into our lives or our financial lives. And I wonder if that's something that also holds people back from receiving advice. It's just sort of for lack of a better word, it's maybe just a professional pride.
Yeah, I get that. I think that once you're an entrepreneur for about 5 minutes, all that pride goes out the window. And I think you would probably say that as well, that, it's almost like you have to give yourself over that this is going to be an exposing, horrible, exciting, wonderful ride. It really is. And that it is not, there is no entrepreneur, small business owner that I know who hasn't gone through those moments of those oh crap moments where you're saying, how did I get here? Where am I? I can't believe this. I'm scared. And so you're going to feel that. And you really, if you're going to succeed, accepting that you're going to get to that place at times is the first step. The second step is you don't want to stay in that place. You want to surround yourself with people who are going to help lift you out of that place and help you understand that, of course, you're feeling this way. You're not crazy. It's scary out there. And finally, you want to be able to come up with creative solutions. And those solutions can come from you. They can come from your staff. They can come from your investors. And they can come from just, again, a really trusted advisor. So your openness to anybody can have a great idea is really critical in your success.
Agreed. The follow-up to that, I suppose, is the next one of the points you make in the book, which is people make the mistake of taking advice from the wrong people. And I wonder how we can avoid that mistake, especially when the stakes are as high as our livelihoods.
Well, I think that most of the advice in that chapter is really about confusing what role people are playing in your life. So, in other words, I would take legal advice from a lawyer. I would not take legal advice from my cousin who took a class in constitutional law, right? And so you really have to be clear who's giving advice and what is their ultimate goal. So in the chapter about the advice givers, what I point out is that a lot of financial professionals may be very skilled at giving you advice in one narrow area, like, hey, here is the type of life insurance policy you need to buy. But you should understand that often that advice is just a transaction, and it doesn't necessarily have to be the best product for you. It has to be a product that's suitable for you, but that there are different kinds of financial professionals, some of whom have to put your best interest first, and some of whom don't have to put your best interest first. And so if you are the kind of person who said, I need a property and casualty insurance person, I just opened up a shop, I want to get, a big policy, and then someone sells you something that someone comes in and says, well, what you really need is you need this fancy souped up policy that does this, and this. And chances are you're going to have this little moment where you think back of listening to this conversation and you're going to say to yourself, is this the best exact policy for the thing I went to this person for? And you're going to ask a lot of questions. And one of the most important questions to ask is always, how are you compensated? What are the other alternatives? And are you actually the kind of professional who has to put my best interest first? That is called a fiduciary. If you are, I might sort of get all sunk in on that advice. If you're not, I may want to get a second opinion.
That's great advice that you're giving about advice. And, we have a variety of different voices we can listen to. And of course, I think we both hope that folks listen to our podcasts and tune in for the people that have their ideas presented there. But there can be often a sort of collection of advice that, I just need a little bit more information before I pull the trigger on something, at which point you might never make a decision or make a hasty one. Where do we stop getting advice and stop collecting information and data and just pull the trigger and make a decision?
Well, I think that if you have the information you need, you have to trust yourself at some point. And, it's sort of like akin to someone saying, I interviewed 3 great surgeons. I need a knee replacement. They're going to do 3 slightly different procedures. Okay. And this is very similar to the kind of way people will get financial or business advice, that there are 3 different approaches and you're going to have to determine which one is the best. Now, I would venture, I don't know if you agree or not, but the people who are looking for 8 or 9 different people, you're going to drive yourself crazy. So I'm a simple gal. I come from network TV. We love 3s. You ever notice those graphics? There are 3 bullet points on them. We love 3s. And so I think that if you have 3 distinct possibilities, maybe you and your advisors, maybe you and your spouse, if you co-own a business, you ultimately will say, this is the one that resonates with me. This is the one that I think is the best way forward for the company, for me personally, and you pull the trigger. And if you really are having such a hard time, then I would venture to say, if you have a hard time making those kinds of decisions, you may not be the right type of person to be a small business owner, because you're going to be making a ton of decisions all the time, and you're going to make a lot of bad decisions. It's okay. You're going to make them. The question is, how do you recover from them?
Yes, excellent point. We go through the first, I'd say, year and 2 years of a small business are some of the most critical. In coffee in particular, you're building up a client base, a customer base. You've got a pretty solid staff, hopefully, by that point. And you might even be profitable as a business, which is great. As some people, it takes longer. Some people are profitable right away. Choose a great location. It's just the market is right. And when you start getting cash flow, and when you start looking at the bank account and not wincing every time, what kind of things are good practices in terms of how you use that money to both, you want to pay yourself at some point, of course, but you also want to invest back into the business. And I imagine there's some problems that come up with the decision to maybe purchase too much in terms of expenses. You can justify like new machinery for the business when you don't need it, or paying yourself too much. What kind of things going forward after you're profitable do you think are healthy practices?
So I'm going to speak out of my personal experience and not so much of a small business owner. I think one of the huge mistakes that my business partner and I made going along is that we never paid ourselves like what we should have been paying from the business, that we reinvested everything into the business. And as a result, it was tough. I mean, we had some years where it would have been smarter to pay ourselves a little bit more like the market rate, not exactly because you're the owner, but that if you invest everything back in the business, then there is risk that you're not taking care of your personal financial life. And so it was funny. We sold a minority interest of our company to a bank at one point, and the only thing that the bank said they really wanted was that we had to draw salaries, that we had to stop this nonsense of, paying ourselves 30 grand a year and pushing everything back. They said, you got to draw a salary. This is insane. And this is not smart. And you can't run your business like this. And so I think that I learned a lot. I mean, this is really the kind of bank that does big deals, and they look at things and they said, this is not rational. And so I think that if you're at the point where you are profitable and you're looking at investing, I think that having a healthy balance between, you don't have to pay yourself gobs of money, but I think that you want to compensate your staff and yourself, and you want to create an environment that's consistent with your value system. So for us, it was funny. Like, we started out and we said, we want to pay health insurance for every single one of our employees. We don't want them to contribute anything. It was how we started our business. We always thought that was a strong value. Then costs went up so much on insurance that we actually couldn't afford it anymore. So, we kind of went to the staff and we said, look, we can't afford this anymore. We can pay 90%. And they were so happy. And they said, listen, no one else gets this as a benefit. So we're very happy that you do this. And then I think by the time we finished, we were paying 80% or something. But what was interesting is that we felt like a core value was that we wanted our employees to always have, because we're financial planners, we wanted them to have a retirement plan. We wanted them to have health insurance. We wanted them to have 3 weeks of vacation a year. Like, we really wanted certain things for our employees because we felt like we were never going to be able to poach somebody from another place on straight salary. We were going to be able to poach somebody about experience and value system. And that we wanted to make the experience of working for our firm something that was different than, working for Joe Schmo investment house. And I think that when you're looking at all the different opportunities that we have to treat our employees well, that the tone you set on the way in is really important. So would I pay my employees more than would I give my employees a bigger raise than I give myself? Yes. Would I give my employees all of the money or the business all the money instead of paying myself? No, you should actually think about this. Like, if you were coming in to run this company as a manager and not an owner, what would you do? And that can help guide you.
So falling on the sword is really not helpful for anybody. And why is that? Because my guess is that you can be, your attitude towards yourself and money bleeds over into how you perceive other people and their relationship with money. So if you're not taking care of yourself, you're less likely to take care of other people.
I think that is pretty much spot on. I think that what I've learned in being involved with small businesses directly and having friends in the business and now just callers and being part of the conversation is that you are setting a tone at the top. Okay. You may not know this, but every single day you walk into that shop, you're setting a tone. Like, I go to the same coffee shop out where, near my vacation home. And I go in there every single weekend and I talk to the woman who manages the shop and I watch how she walks in and I watch how she is the first person in the morning, and just sets a tone, is happy, is engaged, talks to customers, gets her work done, kind of keeps her eyes open. And she was telling me one of the things that was important for her was that she was listening to the feedback from her employees. One said to her, I don't know how you talk to these people. Some of them are so awful. And she said, you know what? It's part of your job, but if someone's really being rude, you don't have to make this extra effort. You're not going to turn them into a good person. And she said, and the other thing is, you don't know what's going on in someone's life. You have no idea. So you think that person who's being a complete jerk to you is just a jerk. It may be that person just found out that, his wife was diagnosed with something horrible or whatever. You don't know. And that, sometimes you can't take everything so personally, but that, when you're at the top and you've got your own personal financial life and it's in disarray, it's going to bleed into your professional life. I promise you. If things feel very much buttoned down and feel comfortable and that you can actually create a space for your employees to have some sort of financial or economic security. And it may not be great. You're running a store. You may have a lot of turnover, but while they're in your business, that you can give them some opportunity to be heard, to have some voice, to pay them adequately, to treat them well, and to teach them some skills that they'll take into wherever they go next in their life.
Bravo. That well said. And it's definitely something that I also love to tell owners and operators and want that to be a reality in more businesses. And wrapping up here is actually a question that I wanted to ask you is the relationship between owners and staff, because those two areas can be pretty siloed. The perception of staff towards owners is they're taking all this money, they're, out for themselves. And owners to staff can sometimes be, oh, they're mismanaging their money and I've got all these problems and they don't understand. And this gap in understanding and having a charitable assumption toward the other person is often the case of creating toxicity in the workplace. What would you say to people, both parties actually, going forward, to help them have a generous and balanced view and context of the other person's life?
It's funny because not only did I own my own small business, but I have an ex who used to own a restaurant. And a restaurant similar, listen, hospitality business is really hard. I think of all the businesses that are out there, it is really hard. And what I remember was what I learned in sort of observing that experience is you want to treat people with respect and you want to assume the best. However, you want to call them on their crap. And here's a pretty wonderful story about that I would I think is kind of illustrates this. So you're running a restaurant and, you get deliveries all the time. It's fine. No big deal, right? Now imagine you're the owner of the restaurant. You go to a party that one of your staff is throwing. They invite you and you open up the ice box to get some ice for your drink. And you see 8 of your steaks sitting in your employee's freezer. Now you say to yourself, am I going to do this right here? What am I going to do? Am I going to embarrass this person? No. So here's what happened. So the answer was staff gathered, staff meeting in the morning. The disclosure hey, you know what? I just want to be clear that, all the deliveries that are coming in, some of them seem to be walking away. So here's what we're going to do. There's a lock on the walk-in kitchen now. And there are 2 people who have the combination to that lock. And I know that's a drag and I know that's a pain in the neck, but that's the way it's going to be. Then the person who was actually stole the food was given one warning, said, I know you did this. I want those steaks back in that freezer. And you screw up again, you're done. Now, weirdly, the person who screwed up and stole those steaks ended up being a 14-year veteran at the restaurant. It was a very instructive thing because I think my knee-jerk reaction was, you stole from me, you're fired. And I said, you got to fire this guy. And the answer was more complicated. The answer was, I don't know what's going on. Something weird has happened here. This is not who I think this guy is. I'm going to have a conversation with this guy. And that second chance made that guy into pretty much an employee for life. It's fascinating to me. I think that we do want to try to respect one another. We want to have ground rules. We want to have boundaries. I had a business partner once who said to me, you want to treat your employees like adults, but when they act like children, they have to have those boundaries erected. And I think that that's not a bad mantra. I'm going to treat you like an adult, but if you act like a child, you're going to get punished. And it may not be a zero tolerance. There may be certain things that are zero tolerance. Maybe you are, you in your business say zero tolerance for someone who actually clips $2 from the till. That's it. But you put that out there. You steal even $1, that is grounds for firing. Just want everyone to know that. That's it. So I think the boundaries are important, reinforcing it, but also knowing that we're all human beings. We all screw up, and sometimes people deserve a second chance.
That's powerful. The context being what causes mercy to enter into the equation. And if we take that example and apply it to how we look at the life of somebody who owns the business that we work in, and we understand maybe, or even ask questions about the finances instead of making assumptions like,
yep.
What is it? How much does it cost to run this business? And once you find out, you might be a little bit more glad to get the raise that you're getting instead of, griping about not getting enough. And some people don't get enough of a raise, but sometimes that's all that you can get because everybody is financially strapped, but the owner has to put on a brave face and inspire. and it just looks, if you're not having a charitable view of that person, then it looks like, hey, they stole my steaks.
Yeah. You know what? I'm going to tell you, after being in business for so long, and I've had terrible disappointments. I've had problems with staff. I think that if you're the kind of person who is really going to assume the worst in everybody, you're going to find the worst in everybody. And if it's just it's a real tough place to operate. So you'd like to assume the best. You learn a little bit along the way. I'm sure I'm not a parent. I've got 2 dogs, but I think that, you want to make sure that you're really clear in how you articulate what is expected and what is, what is sort of the cringeworthy, horrible thing that you say that's just never accepted. And the other piece that is, you know what? I can bring mercy to this. I have an understanding and I want to be consistent, but this is a case where I'm going to use my own judgment. And, you're not perfect. We're not perfect. You know that. We'll figure it out along the way, but talking to each other really does help.
Oh, I know that too well. So going forward here, as we approach money and, managing it in our personal lives and in our business lives, what is the one thing that you really is kind of a mantra that you want people to remember as a result of your book and at the end of this conversation that you think is going to be sort of the linchpin that holds all this information together and makes it work?
I think that if the only thing you remember from this conversation is that I am more than my investment account. I am more than the money in the bank. I am trying to live a life with a value-driven life where I have some control and I'm making some, helping enrich some of my employees, some of my customers. That's what I'm striving for. That's about all you can ask for. So ease up on yourself. Take a deep breath, run the numbers, make your decisions, and you'll be able to move on. And I wish everybody listening great luck and good fortune to you all, because it's a tough road ahead of you, and it's never boring.
Jill, thank you so much for joining us on the show. This has really been a great conversation. I've learned a ton, and I recommend everybody go out and get your book, apply it. And where can we find you on tour coming up here? I know you're on book tour. Where are the places that we can keep in touch with your work?
Well, you can just bookmark jillonmoney.com. That's where all of my stuff resides, my TV work, my radio work, my podcast, my writing. And I'm going to be taking a little summer break from book tour, but hopefully starting back up in the fall.
Excellent. Thank you so much again. This has been great. Thank you for your wisdom.
Well, thank you so much for having me. I really appreciate it.
Well, I'm so thankful that we got to talk with Jill and that we ended the way we did in this conversation. That last bit of advice is so key, and it was a common thread, I think, throughout this conversation. And that was to keep in mind that you're more than your money and your bank account, whether there's a lot in it or not very much. It doesn't define you. And as Jill has said multiple times in this conversation, that the money itself is a means to an end. And when we define the terms of our relationship with the money, that we're in control of that balance of what it means and what it's there for, we can live a little bit more of a fulfilled life when it comes to money. And this is something that was such a helpful reminder to me. And there's so many key parts of this conversation that I will be applying to the way I view my money. And I hope that a lot of things stood out to you as well. And I'd love to hear what those were in the comments of the Instagram post for this episode. But let me say thank you so much to Jill for joining us on the show. It was an honor to have you on. Thank you for sharing your wisdom. I would definitely advise you to get this book, learn more about Jill, this book, and other things that she has written and appeared on. And you can just keep this conversation going with her work over at jillonmoney.com. And thank you so much again, Jill. Now, of course, if you want to reach out to me, you know the email, chris@keystotheshop.com. If you have comments, questions, feedback for me about the show, Or if you want to reach out to me and see what it would look like to work with Keys to the Shop Consulting in your operation, then that is also the email to use, chris@keystotheshop.com. Keys to the Shop Consulting is available not only for on-site training and consultation, but over the phone, remote consultation as well. So there's some great options there. I look forward to hearing from you, having a conversation with you. And that's it for today's show. Stay tuned for Founder Friday later this week. We are going to be interviewing Jasmine Dietrich Wilson, the owner of Dietrich Espresso. This is the first time that we're interviewing an owner of drive-thrus. So really interesting concept and a very interesting story as well. You're not going to want to miss that coming this Friday, Founder Friday. And I hope that you have an amazing week this week. Thank you so much for joining me on the show. And of course, I hope that this episode has given you keys to the shop.